you were here last week. Do any of you remember what Abby talked with you about last week? The story? Yeah. We did. We talked about God and rainbows. Do you remember what the rainbow was a sign for?
Good luck.
I mean, it could be good luck. So the rainbow was a sign of God's promise. God's promise to Noah and to all people that God was never going to send a flood like that ever again. Today, in our first reading, we heard another story about God making a promise. And we use that special word covenant again. That means a special promise. And so God is going to make a promise to a man and a woman, Abraham and Sarah. At this time, their names are Abram and Sarai. And God says, I know that you don't have any kids. And I know that you're getting pretty old. But I promise you are going to have a lot of kids. In fact, you're going to have so many kids, you're not even going to be able to count the descendants that are going to come from your line. Compare them to the stars in the sky or grains of sand on the earth. That's how many descendants you're going to have. Kids and kids of your kids, all the way down. So that's a pretty big promise, right?
Yeah. If God gets all this, if he has a machine that makes kids, then he'll put it in and make this kids out.
Yeah, I don't think that God used a machine, but God did make it so that Sarai would have lots and lots of kids with Abram, and they would have lots of descendants. So in the earlier covenant, when God promised, I'm not going to send another flood like that, the sign was a big rainbow. Now here there's another sign, but it's kind of different because it's not anything you can really see. The sign that God gives them here is God changes their names. So their names are Abram and Sarai. And God says, the sign of this covenant, of this promise that I'm going to make with you, is going to be to change your names. So now instead of Abram, you're going to be Abraham. And instead of Sarai, you're going to be Sarah. So really, God adds an H to both of these names. Why do you think God might add an H? Yeah.
Because he's changing the name for them.
Yeah, changing the names. What kind of sound does an H make? Right? What does that also sound like? Does it sound like you're breathing? Yeah. That H sound kind of sounds like the breath in our lungs, right? And just 1 minute, Ben. And the breath in our lungs is like the breath of life. And you know, there's a story where God gives the name that God has, and that name is Yahweh. That also has some H's in it. Can you hear that? And so these name changes that God gives to Abraham and Sarah adds in this H sound, this breath sound, this God sound into them. And that's the sign of this promise. The meaning of it, just 1 second, bud. The meaning of their name does not change. Their names still mean the same thing. Abraham still means father of nations, and Sarah still means princess, but God still changed their name. And sometimes when God makes a promise with us, when we get to know God, sometimes we change a little bit inside. We might become kinder, we might become more joyful. There's lots of ways in which our life might change when God comes into it. Let's say a prayer together, okay? Can you repeat after me? Dear God, we are glad to be your children. Thank you for changing us with your promises so that we can be good and kind and fully ourselves. Amen. All right, you guys can head on back.